Welcome to the Midnight Mind. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and while you're at it, hit that like button for me. I really would appreciate it. It's midnight, and tonight we step inside the mind of Carl Jung. Have you ever wondered whether the choices you make are truly your own, or whether you're being pulled along by something deeper, something hidden inside you? The Greeks believed fate was written into the fabric of the cosmos, inescapable even for kings. Today, psychology offers a darker possibility. What you call your will might be little more than the unconscious steering you into the very outcomes you most fear. Few stories capture this with more chilling clarity than the tragedy of Oedipus. Oedipus was born under a curse, a prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother. His parents, horrified, abandoned him to die on a mountainside. But fate had already set the stage. The child was rescued, raised in ignorance of his origins, and grew into a man convinced he could outrun destiny. When he too heard whispers of the prophecy, he fled the city he believed to be his home, determined to escape the crime foretold. Yet every step he took brought him closer to its fulfillment. On the road, he quarreled with a stranger and killed him in rage, unaware that the man was his true father. Later, he freed the city of Thebes by answering the riddle of the Sphinx, becoming a celebrated ruler, and was rewarded with the hand of the widowed queen, who turned out to be his mother. In trying to escape his fate, Oedipus walked straight into its jaws. The prophecy was not avoided, it was completed. His tragedy was not that he chose wrongly, but that his choices themselves were blind. Carl Jung once wrote that myths are not ancient lies, but mirrors of psychic truth. The story of Oedipus is not meant to be taken as literal incest and patricide. Instead, it's an archetype, a living pattern of the human mind. The real meaning is not about crime, but blindness. The blindness we all have to the forces inside us. Oedipus is every person who runs from their shadow, only to be seized by it. He is the image of destiny shaped by the unconscious. Jung believed that the unconscious is not a dead place, it's alive. It dreams, it plots, it moves unseen beneath the surface of the waking mind. And when we ignore it, when we pretend it has no power, it doesn't vanish, it waits. It directs our choices in secret. The more desperately we insist that we are in control, the more cleverly the unconscious bends us toward the very outcomes we wanted to escape. Fate is not always imposed by the gods. Often, it is born within. You can see this pattern in your own life. Think of the man who fears becoming like his father, only to repeat his father's rage. Or the woman who runs from toxic relationships, yet unconsciously chooses the same type of partner again and again. These are not accidents. They are repetitions of the unconscious. Like Oedipus, we think we're steering clear of the prophecy, when in reality, we are living it out step by step, with eyes half closed. Jung suggested that myth is the language of the soul. It speaks in symbols and patterns rather than literal facts. Oedipus represents the archetype of the man at war with his own inner truth. He believes he can outwit the design of his nature, but what he refuses to see in himself becomes the very instrument of his downfall. His tragedy is universal. When we deny what lies within us, we hand it more power. Suppressed truths return, often in destructive and fateful ways. The image of Oedipus tells us something terrifying about human freedom. You're not simply free to do as you wish. Much of your life is shaped by what you refuse to acknowledge. If you repress anger, it leaks out in violence. If you repress desire, it emerges in distortion. If you repress weakness, it drives you into arrogance. The unconscious doesn't care about your intentions. It cares about expression. And if you don't face it willingly, it will force itself upon you as fate. The Greeks feared the gods because they knew the gods were images of the unconscious. They punished hubris, the arrogance of believing one could defy divine law, because hubris always ended the same way. Denial creates destruction. Oedipus is a man of hubris. He thinks he can outsmart destiny. He believes that avoidance equals freedom. Yet avoidance is precisely the path that delivers him to ruin. The lesson is stark. What you resist inwardly, you encounter outwardly. The prophecy lives inside you. We all carry a prophecy. It's not written on temple walls, but etched in our unconscious. The patterns of trauma, the inherited shadows of family, the unexamined beliefs we live by without knowing. To believe you can outrun these forces without ever confronting them is to be like Oedipus. Every attempt to avoid your inner truth becomes another step to its trap. Fate is not external. Fate is the mask of the unconscious, worn until you recognize its face. And so, the story of Oedipus is not a tale of gods punishing men for amusement. It's a warning written in myth. It says the harder you deny what lies within, the more powerful it shapes your life. The man who swears he will never betray becomes the one who betrays. The woman who insists she has no fear becomes paralyzed by it. Oedipus teaches us that denial is not escape, it's surrender. To be blind to the unconscious is to walk willingly into fate. Oedipus was celebrated for his intellect. He alone solved the riddle of the Sphinx, where others failed and died. Yet his very triumph exposes the irony of his nature. He could unravel the mysteries of the world, but not the mystery of his own life. This blindness is the heart of his tragedy. He sees everything except himself. His mind is sharp, but his vision is clouded by denial. Oedipus is proof that intelligence without self-knowledge is a path to ruin. When the blind prophet Tiresias enters the play, the irony deepens. Tiresias cannot see the world with his eyes, yet he perceives the truth of Oedipus's fate. Oedipus, by contrast, mocks the prophet's blindness while remaining blind to his own condition. Here, myth speaks in symbol. There are two forms of sight. One is physical, concerned with surfaces and appearances. The other is inner, born of the unconscious. To lack this inner vision is to live in ignorance, even if your eyes are open. Tiresias tells Oedipus plainly, "You mock my blindness, do you? But I say to you, with both your eyes are blind. You cannot see the wretchedness of your life." This is the archetype of projection. What Oedipus mocks in others is precisely what consumes him. He blames the prophet. He blames his brother-in-law, Creon. He blames conspiracies around him. But he never turns the accusation inward. This is how the shadow first appears. Not as an inner presence we recognize, but as an enemy we cast outside ourselves. Carl Jung rejected Freud's narrow reading of the Oedipus complex as literal desire for the parent. He saw the myth as something far larger, the struggle of every human being with unconscious archetypes of family, authority, and desire. The parental figures in myth are not just parents, they're symbols of authority and origin. The child's struggle is not only sexual or familial, it is spiritual. We seek to define ourselves against the forces that create us, yet we remain tethered to them unconsciously. The shadow emerges most fiercely when we deny this tether. In Jung's psychology, the shadow is everything we disown, repress, or refuse to admit about ourselves. It is anger we call righteousness. It's envy we disguise as criticism. It is desire we bury under morality. Oedipus embodies this denial. He refuses to see his own role in his misfortune. He accuses everyone else of treachery until the evidence points back to himself. Only then does the shadow stand revealed. The enemy he hunted is himself. Creon, unjustly accused of conspiracy, responds with words that echo far beyond the play. "In time, you will know with all certainty. Time is the only test of honest men. One day is space enough to know a rogue." This is the cruel reality of projection. Lies and shadows cannot endure forever. Time exposes them. What is hidden in the unconscious eventually rises to the surface. In our lives too, the masks we wear may last for years, but truth waits patiently. And when it arrives with force. Consider the leader who blames enemies for every failure, only to fall by his own corruption. Or the friend who insists on loyalty while secretly betraying. Or the person who condemns vices they secretly indulge in. These are not exceptions, they are the rule. Projection is the shadow's favorite disguise. Like Oedipus, we accuse others of what we cannot admit within. But as Creon reminds us, time unmasks the rogue. The longer you deny your shadow, the more devastating its return when truth finally comes. Oedipus's pursuit of truth becomes an act of self-destruction. He demands to uncover the murderer of King Laius, never realizing that he is calling for his own judgment. The stranger that he met and killed on the road was King Laius, who turns out to be his biological father. And that's the reason that he ended up marrying his mother. This is the archetypal danger of confronting the shadow unprepared. Once invoked, the truth cannot be controlled. The unconscious doesn't yield politely. It erupts, often with catastrophic force. For Oedipus, the search for justice leads to horror. For us, the search for truth may dissolve identities, careers, and illusions we thought were solid. And yet this confrontation is necessary. Jung warned that repressing the shadow doesn't eliminate it, it merely strengthens its grip. The only path to freedom is recognition. But recognition demands humility. Oedipus lacked this. He clung to certainty, authority, and pride until reality stripped them away. This is why his quest for truth ends in ruin rather than transformation. He was unprepared to see himself clearly. He wanted the truth on his terms, but the truth arrives only on its own. The myth of Oedipus is not about the punishment of sin. It's about the blindness of denial. It warns that our intelligence, our success, and even our moral confidence mean nothing if they are not grounded in self-awareness. To solve riddles of the world, but ignore the riddle of your own soul is to be like Oedipus. Triumphant in appearance, doomed in reality. The shadow does not vanish when ignored. It waits, and with time, it ensures that the prophecy is fulfilled. The takeaway is stark but liberating. Freedom doesn't come from escaping the shadow, but from facing it. To deny the unconscious is to serve it blindly. To see it clearly is to begin loosening its grip. Oedipus shows us what happens when the shadow is ignored until it erupts. Jung shows us that integration is possible, but only through courage, honesty, and the willingness to see ourselves without illusion. The shadow is not the end of freedom, it is the beginning of it. The climax of Oedipus's story is one of the most haunting in all of literature, when the truth finally crashes down upon him, that he has killed his father and married his mother. He doesn't flee from judgment. He becomes his own judge. In a single violent act, Oedipus blinds himself with the pins of Jocasta's dress, who was both his wife and mother. His eyes, once so proud of their clarity, are extinguished. The symbolism is brutal and clear. He denied inner sight, so outer sight is torn from him. This act of self-blinding is not simply punishment, it is revelation. By stripping himself of physical vision, Oedipus acknowledges at last the blindness that defined his life. He couldn't see the truth when it mattered, so now he chooses blindness as the symbol of truth's cost. In mythic terms, the sacrifice of his eyes is the sacrifice of illusion. He exchanges the comfort of ignorance for the harsh clarity of knowledge. Only in darkness does he begin to see. Jung believed that the unconscious demands such sacrifice. To confront it is to endure suffering, humiliation, and loss. Individuation, the process of becoming whole, doesn't arrive through comfort. It arrives through disintegration, through the collapse of false identities and the burning away of illusions. Oedipus teaches us that suffering is not an accident of fate, but the necessary crucible of transformation. The unconscious strips us down, forcing us to face truths we would rather avoid. And in this stripping, a new kind of vision emerges. The chorus in Oedipus Rex laments the tragedy with words that echo into every human life. Count no man unhappy until he dies, free of pain at last. This grim reminder reflects a deep truth of existence, that our stories cannot be judged while we are still living them, for the unconscious is always at work, reshaping destiny until the end. We cannot escape suffering, but suffering is not meaningless. When accepted consciously, it becomes the raw material of self-knowledge. This is why Jung placed suffering at the heart of psychological growth. He wrote that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The unconscious resists exposure, and so it punishes the ego that dares to approach it. But in that punishment lies possibility. Oedipus loses his sight, his throne, his mother, and his pride. Yet in this ruin, he gains something that had eluded him all his life: awareness. His tragedy becomes paradoxical freedom, the ability at last to see himself clearly. In modern life, we experience Oedipus's fate in quieter ways. A career built on denial collapses in scandal. A relationship sustained by illusion ends in betrayal. A self-image rooted in lies shatters under pressure. Each collapse feels like destruction, but beneath it lies the chance for individuation. The unconscious strips away the false so that something truer can emerge. Like Oedipus, we may blind ourselves in despair, but through suffering we are forced to confront what we refused to see before. Nietzsche, reflecting on Greek tragedy, argued that true strength is not the avoidance of suffering, but its embrace. "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger," he declared. Not as a platitude, but as a recognition of life's brutal necessity. In Oedipus, we see this principle in its most extreme form: a man destroyed by truth, yet remade by it. His blindness becomes his second sight. His downfall becomes his strange liberation. Nietzsche would call this the tragic path to greatness. The Oedipus archetype teaches us that there is no freedom without confrontation. The unconscious doesn't forgive neglect. If denied, it destroys. If faced, it transforms. Each of us carries within us patterns of fate, ancestral wounds, hidden desires, repressed memories that steer our lives invisibly. To ignore them is to live under a silent curse. To confront them is to accept suffering willingly in exchange for authenticity. Oedipus isn't simply a cautionary tale. He is a mirror of our own unfinished lives. And so the question becomes personal. What truths are you refusing to see? What patterns keep repeating in your life, disguised as coincidence? Where do you place blame on others when the source may lie within? These are not abstract questions. They're the modern form of prophecy. Your unconscious is speaking, whether you acknowledge it or not. You may deny it, as Oedipus did. You may mock it, as he mocked Tiresias. But denial changes nothing. Only recognition breaks the cycle. The final warning of Oedipus is clear. The unconscious will have its way. You can deny it, but it will erupt as fate. You can repress it, but it will return as catastrophe. You can refuse to see, but blindness will be forced upon you. The alternative is not easy, but it is possible. You can choose to face your shadow willingly. You can endure the suffering of self-knowledge. And in that suffering, you may discover the freedom Oedipus only touched in his ruin. The Oedipus archetype is not a curse of the past, it's a living warning. Deny the unconscious and you will be destroyed by it. Face it and you may be freed. Freedom is not found in running from your prophecy. Freedom is found in turning inward, in daring to look at what you most fear to see. The path is dark, the cost is great, and the suffering is real. But beyond it lies the possibility of vision, of wholeness, of liberation. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. And if you would like to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. And I'll see you guys next time.